And in the most literal sense of the title of my talk here tonight, Old Gems in New Settings, they were indeed often reused throughout history and put in new settings. I have two examples here. To the left, you will see a sealstone, or so-called intaglio, carved in red jasper in Roman times in the mid-2nd century, featuring a portrait of the Emperor Antoninus Pius. Another example you see to the right here, this lovely young lady, which was one of my finds a few years back. She came out of a pile of broken up 19th century gold jewelry I just found in a French provincial auction, and I sold off the rest of this group lot. I sold off for its scrap value, made a small profit. So that means that this little piece has actually cost me less than nothing, and I'm vulgar enough for that to make me appreciate this girl even more than I would otherwise have done. 19th century is the setting actually in a sort of archaeological revival style of the Castellani workshop, or perhaps rather the workshop of Melillo in Naples, who was also trained in the Castellani workshop. And the setting itself is actually of marvelous quality, of a great example of 19th century goldsmithery. And she used to be part of an object of personal adornment that is characteristic of the 19th century and didn't exist in Roman times, which I also find is very charming. This was a hat pin once. But at some point, someone found it became annoyed by the needle and the shaft, and they snapped it off. The cameo itself, however, I could see, even though this too, like all the pieces of jewelry in the lot that was sold as 19th century, but I suspected it was something more interesting than that, and that was confirmed when I actually got it. The cameo is from the 160s AD, and is a portrait seemingly of the Empress Lucilla, daughter of Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor, and wife of his co-emperor Lucius Verus. Shown here around probably the time of her marriage to Lucius Verus in 161 AD. And the Empress Lucilla is not perhaps so generally known, though to some extent she actually is today. She's known today for primarily, I think, for featuring in Ridley Scott's movie Gladiator, where she's played by the actually Danish actor, like me, Danish actress. Well, I'm not an actress, but I'm Danish at least. Connie Nielsen. I think the only bad thing you can say about this lovely little lady is that she's not quite so pretty as Connie Nielsen is, but in all other respects, she is a true stunner. I was very happy to have found her. Here's another example of a Roman empress you see to your left. And this was actually a piece that came up in a timeline auction some years back. You will also notice that the top part of the face has gone, obliterated. This is not incidental damage. This was done deliberately. It was not just caused by one knock that removed this part of the face. There was a couple of hammer blows did this to this lady. Nevertheless, from the hairstyle, it's fairly clear who she must have been, namely the Empress Crispina, married to the Emperor Commodus, also known from the Ridley Scott's Gladiator movie. And to the right, I've shown a coin of Crispina. You can see immediately that this is the same hairstyle. And the very fact that the Roman cameo to your left has actually been abused so cruelly shows us that it must have been her. It must have been an empress. It's not just a private lady who happened to sport the same hairstyle as the Empress Crispina, because then there would have been no reason to actually remove her face in this brutal manner. So this is a sort, and this is it is connected with with the career, the life of poor Crispina, because when Commodus eventually tired of her, he banished her in 188 AD and had her executed a few years later. So it's in connection with this, with her fall in 188. Her cameo portrait became an embarrassment, and what was done to this was what was also done to her marble portraits, bronze statues. They were torn down, destroyed, bashed up, melted down. And I remember actually when this came up in a vetting, in a viewing session, and I wasn't too pleased with myself at the time, because there's one of the times when I'd actually wished that I had less knowledge in these matters, because I could unfortunately tell immediately what this was and what it was about. But if I hadn't known, I could have bid on it myself, and I mean, well, could probably have bought it myself at rock bottom price, since it was a damaged piece. But of course, I had to tell exactly what it was, and that means that even in a case like this, where it's a damaged piece, you would think that this would commercially ruin it. Not quite, because the damage itself, it's part of its story, and it's part of Roman history. It can be actually dated to an exact point of Roman history. So the very damage, it is part of the story of the object and part of the fascination. The setting must be some later modern setting, because no one would have destroyed the cameo in ancient times and then put it in a gold setting. That doesn't really make sense as far as I can see it. Here's another example. The photo is not particularly pretty, but you can see that these two faces have been damaged pretty much in exactly the same way. The bearded gentleman to the right must be the Emperor Macrinus, who ruled very briefly only for 1 year, in 217 to 18 AD. And the portrait to the right is his young son and eventual co-emperor Diademinian. And they were both toppled and killed in 218 AD. But you can see that the way the heads are attacked and destroyed is exactly like with the Crispina cameo, that the attack targets the eyes first and foremost. The eyes, then the nose, but the primary sensory organs. So this is a sort of a typical way to obliterate such characters from history. There were other cases, however, where it was felt that it was, the dilemma must have been if people stood there and had a gorgeous piece of jewelry or a large, spectacular cameo, and it was a great pity after a few years to simply smash it up, because the emperor had lost relevance or been assassinated. So to your left here, there's an example of another approach to this problem. This is a huge piece. This was not a piece used for personal adornment or a piece of personal jewelry. This is one of the so-called state cameos, that is glyptic pieces that were so large that they couldn't be worn as jewelry, so they were used as we actually, to be absolutely honest, we have no idea. These so-called big state cameos, they're never mentioned in Roman literature. We have no idea how they were displayed or how they were used or what their function was. But this particular instance is now in the Kunsthistorisches Museum in Vienna, and it comes from the old imperial Habsburg collections. And here, the cameo originally portrayed another Roman emperor who fell into disgrace and was assassinated, namely the Emperor Caligula. And it was then not smashed up, but recarved into a portrait of his successor, his uncle and successor, Claudius. And it is very, very clear what has happened here, because you can see that his hair fringe on his forehead is actually structured in 2 tiers or 2 layers. At the top, you have Caligula's hair fringe, And you can recognize the exact arrangement of the hairlocks. You can recognize from the Caligula's main portrait type. It's known from many marble copies. And below that, they have then, in reworking the cameo, added a lower secondary hair fringe, and the arrangement of these hairlocks fits exactly the main portrait type of the Emperor Claudius. So it's absolutely clear when you compare with the marble versions what has taken place here, and the face has been completely recarved into Claudius. Other things have been done to the piece. Originally, the toga was drawn up to cover the back of the head. That part of the toga has been removed. Probably down here, he held an object, maybe a statuette, that's been cut off, so it looks like, anatomically, like the shoulder has been folded over something. Clearly, a lot of stuff has happened with this in reworking this, and it's not entirely clear how it would have looked originally. What is clear is that it was originally made as a Caligula, and then later on converted into a Claudius. There's another example of this, and this is a sealstone, a tiny bit, 16 millimeters across. As a work of art, it doesn't rate very highly, but it has some quaint, fascinating historical significance. This is actually the same stone, the two pictures you see to the right. To the left is the obverse, or what used to be the obverse, and to the right you see the reverse of the stone. And to the left, this pair here, this is the same. These are the same two gents as we saw here, the Emperor Macrinus and his young son Diadominian. So this was made when they became emperors, senior emperor, as the father was, junior emperor, as the son was, in 217. A year later, there was a rebellion in Roman Syria. The emperors were toppled, assassinated. And then, of course, the owner of this sealstone, who had commissioned this gem and probably used it for sealing his letters, he was now faced with a dilemma. He had wasted his money. The emperor, the stone had lost relevance after little more than 1 year. And it would have been an embarrassment to actually still display your loyalty to these now dead, toppled, disgraced emperors. So what to do then? Well, we can see when we flip it over and look at the back what he actually did. Or we can reconstruct what he must have done. He went back to the gem carver's workshop. He asked the gem carver to remove the stone from its gold ring setting, flip it over, and carve the new emperor's portrait on the back, and then reinsert it into his ring. So no one could then see the now embarrassing two portraits of the toppled empress. Very practical. There's one absolutely delightful, in my view, delightful detail connected with this, and that is that the first version of the two heads has a very fine polish. And polishing a hard stone up to a shine is actually a lot of rather boring, hard work to do. So I'm sure that would have cost him extra. There would have been a substantial extra charge for that extra nice, smooth, shiny finish that was achieved by polishing it up. Whereas if you go to the reverse, where you see the new emperor, the emperor whom we know under the name of Elagabalus, which is actually a misnomer, it was actually the name of his favorite god. That he was very fond of worshipping. His real name was actually in the sources Antoninus, hence probably the A you see engraved before his bust. That's probably as the first letter of his name, Antoninus. But this second imperial portrait here, that has a very matte surface. It hasn't received this final finish. So. And I imagine that this is because, I mean, the guy, when he came back to the gem carver's workshop, once bitten, twice shy, he would not pay extra the second time because of course, the same thing could happen again. In a year's time, the new emperor could also be gone. So this time he saved a bit on his expenses for the seal, and he dispensed with this final polish, and therefore the reverse, the new emperor's portrait, has a very matte finish. But these are then just a few examples of just one tiny chapter, one tiny aspect of how gems were reused or abused in the ancient world, and about how they can actually tell us something about how people on all social levels actually reacted to changes at the top, how people reacted when one emperor was killed, fell from power, and was replaced by another, the reverberations this had on sort of every social level, right from the imperial court, in the case of a state cameo here of Caligula, then Claudius, and then when we talk about this little jasper ringstone here on what would clearly have been a much humbler social level. So just a taster, but I hope for those of you who already love ancient gems, I hope I've done nothing to undermine that affection, and I hope I've actually shown just part of why it is such a fascinating field and why it is so intimately connected with Roman history, and how private people perceived and experienced Roman history and what happened at the top of the political game.